Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us once again, a quick turnaround guest, and that is Karen Hudes. Karen Hudes, thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Glad to be back.
And I want to continue your intro. So for those watching who don't know, you were a employee of the World Bank. Your last position there was a senior counsel at the World Bank. You were there for 20 years until you were summarily discharged from the bank for repeatedly exposing corruption and fraud and malfeasance at the World Bank. But you still have a lot of friends at the World Bank, a lot of insight. You are out there championing the cause to reform global banking. And I know it's a tall order, but I wanted to bring you back for a couple of things. People were asking more about the banks and how shaky they are, and about gold, and that's a big point. And I wanted to say that this week Nomi Prinz was on. She wrote the book It Takes a Pillage, and she's a former Goldman Sachs managing director. She was there 10 years ago, but still knows how it works, and was saying that the banks are shaky. There are fewer banks with more leverage. Jim Rickards says the same thing. The banks are bigger. The next time it blows up, it'll be worse. Let's talk about what you see in the global banking system. How weak are the banks, and what happens if we don't fix this? What happens? What is a possible scenario?
Well, it's pretty clear where we're headed, and that is to something called permanent gold backwardation. That's a fancy word for people lose confidence in paper currency, because paper currency is exactly that. It's paper. And as long as people think that it's worth money, but currency is something which has to be legal tender. That's the first thing. You have to be allowed to use it as money. But the second thing is that it has to be worth something. It has to be valuable. And if the economic system is such that people lose confidence, and that's where we are, and I can say that because the world's foremost monetary economist, Antal Fekete, who specializes in gold, has been warning us that we're headed to permanent gold backwardation. That means that it's a technical term for traders, that the value of the currency in the future is less than the value today. And that's impossible, because what that would mean is that a trader would earn money no matter what he did. And that's not a tenable situation. So what happened in July was that the banks, the central banks that like to make money by leasing their gold, they stopped doing that, because the risk that they would get their gold back at the end of the lease term was unacceptable. So this is a situation that doesn't happen that often. It happened just before we went off the gold standard in 1970. It's a sign of weakness in the fiat currency. Fiat means you just issue it.
By decree. When you say backwardation, it means that the today price is worth more than the future price. It should be the opposite, the other way around. That today price should be less than December gold or January gold or March 2014 gold. That's what you're saying. You're saying the gold on the barrelhead is worth more right now today than anything in the future. That's backwardation.
Not only that, but when you try to purchase gold today, you usually have to pay a premium for immediate delivery. And you see people lining up in the Asian countries. And one of the reasons that they do this is because they have an experience of when, at a certain point, people who have gold will not sell it at any price, because they expect that paper is paper, and they have zero confidence in the currencies. And
go ahead.
When you get into permanent gold backwardation, this is not just a bad event. This is like the meltdown of all meltdowns. What it means is that you cannot finance international trade. Just think about what that would mean in terms of the jobless rates. It's going to make any depression that we ever had, the 30s, 2008, pale in comparison. And we just can't go there. You have to fix the problem before you get there. So that's something that we ought to be talking about. How do you fix the problem?
Well, before we get to how to fix the problem, let's talk about the problem. And when you say that international trade, we won't be able to have anything in it, be able to conduct international trade, that means that we have to pay somebody in gold. We have to pay somebody in dollars backed by gold or something where they know that people know that they're going to get paid something real, not just some printed money. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there has to be a convention on it. You have to have agreed that that's what you're going to be doing. And that's not the way international trade is normally conducted. Although now we have a situation with the BRICS countries. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They've agreed that their trade, which accounts for 25% of world trade, their trade is no longer going to be financed in dollars. It's going to be offset. That means barter. And at the end of the day, whether it's a month or every 3 months or whatever, they're going to see who's the party that owes the money, and they're going to settle that with gold. So that's been decided. That's a very big indictment of the strength of the dollar. It shows that people are losing confidence.
So what would happen to the United States if the rest of the world shunned the dollar? What would happen to the United States if the banking system went under? If there is some sort of an event, war or some black swan event, what does it look like to the man on the street?
Well, the very first thing is that our credit rating is going to be very severely impacted. Do you remember there was this problem with Standard & Poor's lowering the U.S. credit rating? Yes. And then Eric Holder went around and sued Standard & Poor's. And so recently Standard & Poor's has said, we may have acted a little too quickly when we lowered the U.S. credit rating, because after all, the U.S. currency is the international currency. So let's upgrade the U.S. credit rating. Now, this was actually an underhanded move, because they understand that the dollar is going to lose its status as international currency.
They know that, but they're just going to play this game that we're going to keep it going until it blows up. Is that a good?
That's exactly right. And I have to
but explain that to me. You explain that to me about why they're doing this, and they're saying one thing, but they know something else. Tell me what they're saying, and what do they know?
Well, I'll tell you what they know. They know everything about my case, because
S&P
and the other credit ratings, and Fitch ratings, and also Moody's, because a UK lawyer advised me to start informing the credit rating agencies in detail about my case when the UK Parliament mentioned that there was this problem of corruption at the World Bank, and the World Bank did not resolve the problem, because this lawyer did not want the Parliament to be out ahead of the rest of the world. So what happened is that Standard & Poor's lowered the credit rating, but the other two credit rating agencies just sort of sat there. And, I had been briefing them very regularly. I just received an email that there's a fourth credit rating agency that's about to be started by the Russians and the Chinese and some commercial interests in the United States. Now, this entity, you better believe, the U.S. credit rating is not going to be fictitious.
AA+.
That's right.
It's going to go down.
And that's right. And what happened, unless we embrace the rule of law, unless we clean up this corruption, and a lot of this corruption is coming from the Federal Reserve, but I would have to say the lion's share is coming from the Vatican, from the Jesuits. So we have got to, and there's been something called state capture, which is to say that our legislature and our governmental institutions have been co-opted. And as an example of that, the Federal Reserve, the entities that own the Federal Reserve, own and control the media, the mainstream media, so that the public is deliberately misinformed and kept from learning a lot of what we're talking about today.
But what happens to the man on the street? Let's get granular. What happens to the man on the street if the banking system fails? What happens to America?
Well, let's look at the credit rating first, which is to say if your credit rating tanks, you have to pay a higher interest rate. Now look at the growing debt, and with the imbalance in our budget, the debt is only getting larger. So if you have to pay interest on that, then most of your budget is going to be going to service the debt.
So interest rates are going to go sky high. No more cheap car loans. No more 4.5% 30-year mortgages. Credit card rates rise. All of a sudden, everything, every debt service you have, credit card, mortgages, everything goes up.
And don't forget, if the housing industry is a very important sector in the economy, what this is going to do to the amount of jobs. And then there's something called the multiplier effect, which is when a person loses his job, they're not going to have the money to spend in the rest of the economy. So for every job you lose more jobs because of the multiplier effect. So this would be a major, major crisis. That's the best way to put it.
Would it be worse than the Great Depression? And explain how much unemployment, how much grief, would there be social unrest? Tell me about that.
It would make everything that we have experienced up until now look like nothing happened. It would be of that dimension. Now, as you know,
wait. I don't want to, but explain it. Paint a picture for me. What kind of things would be happening in the economy for John Q. Public? What would happen? I mean, would there be mass unemployment? Would there be social unrest? What would happen? Would checks stop going out to Social Security recipients and pensions? Would the banks implode? Would there be any banks left? I want to talk about that. What would happen?
The banks would be bankrupt. And if the banks are bankrupt, when you go to your ATM and you try to get money out, you push the button and nothing comes out. Yes? That's what would happen. Just think about it.
And then what about unemployment?
And the banks that issued your credit card, well,
Go ahead.
It would make what happened in the Depression look like nothing happened. And we've seen countries where this is going on. We've seen them.
So
look at what's going on in Greece, for example.
Would your paper dollars that you had out of the bank, would that be worth anything?
You would have to give many, many of them to purchase the same things. In Argentina, for example, I was working in Argentina when they had a terrible collapse of their currency, and the prices would change on a daily basis. They would double. There would be zeros added at the end of the money. You would have to go around with a stack this high to buy a piece of fruit. This is what paper currency does when it loses its value.
There you go. And unemployment, what would happen there?
The number of families that would be employed would be in the minority.
More people would be unemployed than employed.
That's correct.
That looks like a recipe for social unrest. I mean, when the money dies, and you can't feed your family, we're talking about people going door to door, kicking in doors, trying to get where they can to feed their families. Is that what you're talking about? A Mad Max type scenario if this fully, implodes?
You would have people leaving the cities for the rural agricultural areas where the food was. You would have lawlessness. I mean, just think about the what has happened in some unfortunate circumstances in the cities where the grocery stores are looted. It would just deteriorate.
So people would be in dire straits. You think if the currency goes, it'd look like Argentina but worse?
That's right.
Explain.
Well, if people don't have confidence in the currency, then they will not sell the things that are worth any money because the money that they're getting is not worth what they would have to sell. So the commerce would suffer.
Oh, well, why would you sell something for dollars if they were going to be inflated the next day? You'd be hoarding everything. Anything of value, you'd hoard it. Is that what you're saying? Commerce would cease.
Right. That's right.
You'd have to barter with something real, like, hey, I've got a case of water if you give me 3 apples, right? Or I'd have to, hey, I have 3 gallons of gasoline if you give me, that loaf of bread. Is that you're talking about stuff like that?
Greg, you're talking about the economy as if it were all local, but don't forget how many items we're importing these days, or components that we're importing in order to assemble here. All of that would fall apart. Medicines, we wouldn't have medicines. There would be pestilence.
Boy, people are in denial about how bad this could get. People are just in total denial. They think everything's fixed. They've been told everything's fixed. Oh, we have an ongoing recovery. They keep up with that all the time. We're printing $1 trillion a year, and you're saying that this is going to blow up. If we keep doing what we're doing, this is going to blow sky high. The currency's going to go poof.
Greg, I'm saying something actually quite different. I'm saying something quite different. One of the things that you said was that Congress wasn't on top of things, and that I was in touch with the World Bank because I had friends. I'm in touch with the World Bank because the U.S. capital increase to the World Bank will not be dispersed until the effects of retaliation against World Bank whistleblowers are eliminated. That is a condition that the U.S. Congress put in the capital increase. They did this because they asked for a Government Accountability Office audit, and the World Bank refused. So there's a very important lesson to be drawn from here, which is that we're actually not on track for all of this terrible scenario that we're talking about. We are on track for the rule of law. For the first time in a long time, this country is taking back its rule of law. People are learning about these problems, and they're holding their government to account. And let me just focus on Governor O'Malley, who's Martin O'Malley. I live in Maryland. He's the governor here. He's the co-chair of something called the Governor's Council. That the other co-chair is Terry Branstad of Iowa. These two governors are working together with the Department of Defense under Peter Varga, or not under Peter Varga. There was an executive order that was issued that set this up. And one of the people on this council is the current president of the National Governors Association. That's Jack Markell from Delaware. All of the governors are very aware of these problems. I have been writing them. I've been keeping the state attorneys general informed, because when I say the World Bank is corrupt, I say more than that. I bought a World Bank bond, and I sued to bring the World Bank into compliance. I was interviewed for the position of general counsel at the World Bank, and the executive search firm was asked to give the information that I gave the executive search firm during my interview. Russell Reynolds asked me, why is it that there are so many general counsels at the World Bank, just one right after the other? I said, that's easy, because the World Bank is not in compliance. The World Bank has $180 billion worth of bonds, and the people that own World Bank bonds are entitled to accurate financial information. So when I was fired illegally, I bought a World Bank bond, and I went to the U.S. Congress, and I went to the SEC, and I went to something called the National Advisory Council on International Monetary and Financial Policies. And that has Ben Bernanke on it. It has the chairman of the SEC on it. And I said to all of these people, you better start doing your jobs. When they didn't, I had the UK call them up, the Serious Fraud Office. And don't forget, Germany, let's go back to gold. Germany had gold that was being held by the Federal Reserve. And when Germany asked for its gold back 3,000 tons of it, the Federal Reserve said, you'll get it back in 7 years. That's an act of war.
Yeah,
Now, I went to the Department of Defense, and I told them that I was not going to stand for them leading us down the path of a certain currency war, because I had an accurate stakeholder analysis that first warned us that we were going to lose the ability to name the president of the World Bank. That happened in 2010. I had been warning them. I said, all right, I've been warning you. You've been ignoring me, and you're not going to ignore me any longer. And so I went to the Governor's Council, and I went to Martin O'Malley, and I said, we are not going to have civil unrest. We are going to do our jobs.
Well,
and so a lot of states...
Oh, hold on a minute. But you're talking about us being isolated and our currency being isolated, and the United States being isolated, then we can't trade, and that's why we'll have civil unrest, and that's why we'll have, this big unemployment and hyperinflation, is because the rest of the world is just not going to play with our dollar. Is that the summation of what you're talking about? That what you're afraid of?
Well, that is the risk. But here's the point, Greg. The Department of Defense knows full well that those are the consequences if we do not get serious about fighting this corruption. The stakeholder analysis that I'm telling you about came out of the Department of Defense. I spoke to the person inside the Department of Defense that agreed that these were the consequences if we didn't act like we were in charge of bringing our whole country into compliance. And that's exactly what's going on now, Greg.
Does that mean
what I'm telling you?
Does that mean bankers are going to go to jail? Does that mean they're going to stop printing money to bail them out?
I'm not worried about that. I'm just not focusing on that. What I'm focusing on is getting currency up and ready to replace these fiat dollars before they go down. Now is the time that we can act. And so that means that every single person that's listening to this has got to go to their governor and say, you've been hearing what you need to do. We need to have a state bank. We need to have our legislature, our state legislature, declare precious metals as legal tender. That's what you're supposed to have in the Constitution. The Federal Reserve actually is against the Constitution. Our Constitution prohibited this kind of banking. How is it that we happen to have it? So everybody listening to this can be working with Bitcoins. Let's go back to Germany for a minute.
Reportedly, they had 1,500 tons is what they had, 1,500.
That's right, but they weren't asking for all of it. They were just asking for 3,000 tons.
300.
And they didn't get it.
300.
300.
300, sorry. So not 3,000, 300. Okay, but they said they'd give you 50 tons a year for the next 6, 7 years. And they wouldn't even let reportedly wouldn't even let the Germans see their gold.
That was why Germany asked
300 tons. Okay, good.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, so let's go back to Germany. When I went to the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, I told them that the representative of the German government on the board of directors, that's Eckhard Deutscher, he was the dean of the board, said that the World Bank board was treated like a mushroom, kept in the dark and covered with fertilizer. Yes? And this accurate stakeholder analysis was warning, not only were we going to have a currency war, but NATO was going to fall apart. We were going to lose our alliance with Germany. And don't forget that Germany is, I think just this week, there was a helicopter that buzzed the consulate in Frankfurt. And a government official said that this was a shot across the bow of the U.S. Now, what was this belligerence? Absolutely not. This was to show that what I'm reporting to you is absolutely correct.
So
Go ahead. The third largest business website is about to publish an article that tells the Germans what it is that the Americans know. So does this look like the alliance is falling apart? No, it looks like we are all banding together to bring rule of law to bear. But the fact of the matter is that the timing is such that we should not sit back and wait for rule of law to be handed to us on a platter. This is mutually reinforcing. If people are serious and start using Bitcoins and start demanding that they get state banks, we will lick the problem together, and that's what we need to do.
But let's go back to what happens if all these fiat dollars go away. So if you have a bank account and you've got a million Federal Reserve notes, what happens when we have rule of law and we have a gold back or some sort of a new currency? Doesn't all that money go poof? I mean, we have 10.8 trillion fiat Federal Reserve notes on deposit. We have 33 billion Federal Reserve notes as a backup. What happens to the banks? This is going to be painful, is it not, for people with Federal Reserve notes?
Well, what you have to do is you have to go back and look at something called the Green-Hilton Agreement, which President Kennedy had signed 10 days before he was assassinated. Yes, there is gold there that can be brought to strengthen the dollar. And that's exactly what has to happen. We have to go to the negotiating table, and we have to speak with all the nations of the world, and we have got to let them know that we know that the Federal Reserve is not a player any longer. They are fired.
So we're going to back dollars, and the rest of the world is going to back their currency. This is the big move on the foot that nobody really reports on mainstream media, that the rest of the world is moving to a gold-backed or a precious metals-backed thing, so a currency. So trade can be conducted. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying? That's the move
right,
underfoot?
but it's not just precious metals, Greg. It's any commodity that's valuable. What
Corn,
you have is
oil,
what you call
lumber, anything, diamonds.
That's right.
Well, we
First
have a lot
of all,
of commodities in
I have
America.
to say,
We're one of the biggest grower of foods. We have a big lumber operation out west. We have all this burgeoning natural gas and oil business. The United States, but the people holding these Federal Reserve notes aren't going to be made whole, correct?
I think that there is enough value there that we don't have to worry about who's going to be left out in the cold. But the real problem is that it's called trying to convene the parties. And that's what the Bretton Woods institutions are good for. And there's going to be an annual meeting on the 9th of October. We have got to be geared up. We have got to show our leaders that we expect the United States to be a respectful nation that subscribes to the rule of law. I mean, we've got a lot of showing to do because we've been in a dominant situation where we've been executing people with drones, declaring them guilty without benefit of court trial. That's acting like a rogue nation. We have got to show the rest of the world.
The drone murder program you speak of, and Dr. Paul Craig Roberts calls it a drone murder program. It's totally devoid of any kind of due process for anyone, particularly the 4 Americans that have been reportedly killed without any due process. Let's close up with gold. So the price of gold, is it being suppressed? You're saying your World Bank buddies say, oh yeah, it's being suppressed. The price of gold is being suppressed. How long can they keep suppressing gold and silver? How long can they do that for? Some people say, hey, it's about to end.
It's market manipulation.
Right? That's a fact.
It's illegal. What's happening is they're offering gold many times the amount of gold that's actually existing in the world. That's called a naked short. That's illegal. They're breaking the law. That's how we have a low price.
And what happens? What happens when that ends? Yeah. What happens when they can't naked short? Do they say one day at LBMA or COMEX, well, we're not going to deliver any more gold. We're out of gold. Because people are saying that they're going to run out of gold, or they're going to run out of gold that they'll deliver. They either cannot or will not deliver gold. What happens? When is that going to happen, and what happens if it does?
It's happening already. There are 2 institutions in Amsterdam that just announced that they're not going to be delivering gold anymore. They're out of that business. It's already happening as we speak, Greg.
Then when is the price going to? Evidently, if they stop delivering gold, the price is going to come up to some real price. Is that right? It should.
It should. Yeah.
And
I think some of it started to come up as people recognized just the extent of the manipulation.
Some people say that they're manipulating so they can continue to get all they can before they turn around and make it go up. Is that a reasonable premise?
Well, Greg, don't forget that there are countries that are signing these contracts and expect delivery of the gold at the deflated price. So this is impoverishing whoever is offering the gold, except that maybe the gold won't be delivered in the future. So the person who's bidding on it is simply buying themselves a lawsuit. They're not buying themselves gold.
And when do you think that this new commodity-backed currency could take effect, in which gold and silver, oil, grains, lumber, natural gas, coal, steel, whatever? When do you think this type of agreement would happen globally?
I have to say that based on the emails that I'm getting in my inbox, I couldn't hazard a guess because there are a lot of people that are claiming that they are, just like the people that are selling gold without there being gold, there are a lot of people that are claiming that they're authorized to gain some of this gold. There are many pretenders, and this is not something that you're going to get a quick agreement on. Yes? So I would say that the job is really on us to solve this on a granular level through the state banks, through you can have credit cards where you're actually backing your payments with gold, bitcoins. I think we have to work where we can move right now as quickly as we can, so that if in a worst case scenario, we're not totally devastated. We're not left flat-footed.
And we could be totally devastated if we're not on the right side of this.
We have got to start doing everything in our power to be prepared for it, and that's going to make it easier at the central conference level to gain agreement, because we won't be as vulnerable.
And if we're last in the chute, if we're the last to go down here and holding on to these Federal Reserve notes, you're saying that ultimately they'll just expire worthless. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Except that I do not expect that to happen, Greg. Everything is showing that we're all going to be working together and that the rule of law will prevail. It's just that it's a matter of think of it as a horse race, and you're trying to get yourself in the strongest position out of the out of the chute.
Yep.
And the way to get ourselves in the strongest position is to have alternatives to the fiat currency right now, and that's very much within our power right now.
Should normal people go out and buy gold and silver coins and just hold on to them, no matter what the price, forget about the price today, and just get possession of them as a hedge against what might happen to Federal Reserve notes?
That's an excellent idea, yeah.
Well, you tell me, is that a good
Except that
idea?
I have to say, well, Greg, I have to say that some people are telling me that there is a lot of gold that has been hoarded through the centuries. And so as an investment, a long-term investment, I think what it is that that's hedging for the downside, but that we may all end up in a strong position.
And if we're not all, I find it hard to believe that everybody's going to get all the gold spread around to everybody else. I would imagine that this is going to be kind of uneven for the prepared, and people who are buying gold and silver, they're going to do better than the people who are holding Federal Reserve notes, aren't they? I mean, who's going to cash in somebody's Federal Reserve notes opposed to the people cashing out gold or silver? I mean, it's not going to be an even spread.
It's just, what I'm trying to say, Greg, is that the amount of gold that's being dealt with in these centralized levels, the amount of gold in the Vatican, for example, this is going to make the amount of gold that people are considering pale by comparison. There is so much gold that I've been informed is there.
More than the official numbers that they put out, you're saying?
That's why I'm getting confused about the number of zeros, Greg.
Well, so is it a good idea for people to be holding on to gold and silver coins as a hedge?
That's if it takes us a long time to sort things through. In other words, that's strengthening yourself for the downside. Yeah, because then you'll have something to buy food with, I would think. I would think it's insurance. Think of it as insurance, not investment.
All righty. Karen Hudes, a former World Counsel for the World Bank for 20 years. And your website is KarenHudes.com or .net. Which is it?
.net.
.net. Okay, KarenHudes.net. I know you had a problem with some viruses on there. People attacking you for telling the truth, but that's all cleared up now. KarenHudes.net. You're the former World...
It's K-A-Hudes.
Yes. K-A. Hudes, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thanks for having me, Greg.